Hello everyone, my name is Ron Jackson. Today I'm going to instruct you about the full stack web development. And first of all, you could tell that it's a VS Code using writing the HTML document, which itself is just running a HTML page, a static HTML page about how the full stack works. Now let's just switch to my page here, and you could tell that's the full stack web development ecosystem. And I'm going to show you how all those technologies we have learned in the first half of the semester and learn how they work together to create the modern web applications. In the first half of the semester, we have just covered the HTML, the CSS, the Bootstrap, Node.js, Express, and Mongo database. All these tools may seem quite like separate technologies, but they are actually pieces of a completed system. Now, let me show you in this how they work in the whole big picture. And from my perspective, those stuff work in three layers. The first layer, of course, is the front end for the client side. The second layer is for the backend for the server side. And the second layer is for the database, the data layer. Now let's go to the first layer, the front end. This is where the user see and interact with. It is built with the HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. Now we could just think of HTML as the building structure, the wall, the doors, and the windows. CSS as the interior design of colors, fonts, and layout. Bootstrap is just like buying furniture from the IKEA. It gives you pre-made components that looks good and work together. The second floor is the backend, the server side, where all the business logic happens. It's powered by the Node.js, and Node.js is just like the buildings in the electrical system. It provides the power to make everything work. And Express is just like the control panel that manages how electricity flows to different parts of the building. The third part is the database layer. This is where we store information permanently. MongoDB is just like the building's boxes. It stores JSON documents and that can easily access and modify. Now let's go through a cycle to decide how it works. In the first step, the user interacts with the HTML, the CSS, the Bootstrap interface in their browser. Now you can see that's okay, never mind. Now let's just suppose we have a click button. I have not. I'm lazy. I didn't make that. But just imagine there's a click button here. It could be yellow or green, which is decided by the CSS itself. All those code. How this button there is written by the HTML. In the Bootstrap, it's for the grid system. It decides where is the button. Maybe it could be here, it could be here, so it's decided by the Bootstrap. Okay, and step 2 is that after you click the button, the browser just sends an HTTP server request to the server. This is just like sending a letter through the email. And step 3 is that the Node.js itself receives the incoming request. It happens at the backend. The backend is always listening for incoming requests. And step 4 is the Express. Express may route the request to the appropriate handler. It can now understand how it routes the request, and it's just sending to the correct function. Of course, you should write the function right. And step 5 is for the middleware. It functions to process and validate requests. Think of it as some kind of a security checkpoints. It checks if you are logged in, it validates your ID, and logs the requests. And in the step 6, the Express queries the MongoDB for the required data. It's just like saying, "Hi database, save this new task for me." And step 7 is that the database shall just return the data to the Express. The MongoDB will save the tasks and send back its confirmation. And then in the step 8, it kind of express the formats that responses some kind of just package them to the JSON response and send it back to the browser. And in step 9, the server just sends the HTTP response back to the browser. Finally, the browser just receives data and update the UI dynamically. And this is a whole cycle. And here comes why this architecture matters. This architecture is beautiful because all the setup is a separation of concerns. Each layer has its own job. The front end is for the user experience, backend is for the business logic and security, and the database is for the data consistency. All these three layers shall make our applications have the following features. First of all, it's easier to maintain. If you need to redesign, you only need to touch the front end. It makes that more secure. Some kind of for all those sensitive logic stays on the server. This makes it more scalable. You can just upgrade each layer independently and much more collaborative. Different teams members can work together on different layers. And here comes the best part. The JavaScript is everywhere. It is the same language that runs on the front end, backend, and even the database with JSON. This is a revolutionary because 10 years ago you have to learn all those multiple languages to build a complete web application. Now let's dive into each technology and see how they actually work together. First of all, let's go back to the HTML. Just think of HTML as a blueprint of a house. It defines how everything goes on the page, not how it looks like. Here's some kind of HTML give us. Let's go to the VS Code to check out. You could tell that these are different tags. A div tag is a container. A form is for the, you could tell this is div here. I should have a form. Let me search for that. Yeah. No, no, transform. That's a transform. I didn't use the form tag here. So a form tag collects the user's input and the button. Maybe I also does not use any button. Yeah, I didn't use any button here. But a button is a trigger action. These are just the Lego blocks. Each has a very specific purpose. Those kind of semantic HTML instead of using that generic div tags is everywhere. We may use very other kind of meaningful tags like the header, the nav, the active, the footer. This is just like the labeling rooms in your house. It makes the structure clearer for both our developers and the browsers. And here comes to the DOM. When the browser reads the HTML, it creates a document object model, a tree structure of all your elements. This is crucial as it allows CSS to style elements and JavaScript to manipulate them. Now let's go to the CSS. The CSS is cascading the style sheets control how HTML looks like. If HTML is the skeleton, the CSS is the skin, its clothes. The CSS uses selector to target HTML elements. You can select them by the tag name, the class, the ID. Let's go to the CSS. Yeah, I've separate the CSS to the CSS folder. That's a very good idea. Now, you can tell that this is the ID. You decide which one, for which one you should check out. to check out the size, where it should be, possession, and even the color stuff. Yeah, the box model is fundamental to CSS. Every element is a box with content, heading, border, and margin. Understanding this is just like understanding how to arrange furniture in a room. You need to know the dimensions and spacing. The modern CSS gives us incredible layout tools, like the grid that creates complex two-dimensional layouts. A flexbox arranges items in rows or columns. The responsive design it adapts to very different screen sizes using media queries. Like you on a PC or on a mobile phone, they should be all different. And now comes to the Bootstrap. It's kind of accelerator. Bootstrap is a CSS framework that speeds us in development. It's just like having a professional designer on your team. Bootstrap gives us three main things. One, a great system, a 12-column responsive layout. Let me just first introduce you how to use Bootstrap. It's fairly simple. You just use this this coding in your head, and that's it. Very simple. Now let's go back. And second, it's kind of pre-built components. All those buttons, cards, models, navigator bars, all stuff. You just need to add the right classes to HTML. And that's done. And the third is the utility classes. The quick styling like M3 for the margin, P2 for the padding, and I should have used these later. And the text center for the texts. Right. And here comes to the Node.js. The Node.js changed everything. Yeah, before Node.js, JavaScript only run on the browser. Now the Node.js is built on the Chrome's V8 engine, which is the same engine that runs the JavaScript on your browser. This makes it incredibly fast as it compiles the JavaScript to machine code. Here's the key features of the Node.js. The event-driven architecture. Node.js uses an event loop instead of waiting for one operation to finish before starting another. It can handle thousands of operations simultaneously. And then the npm, the Node Package Manager. I shall instruct you how to use that later. It's very simple. Let me just show you first. We just use the npm, and there should be all kinds of stuff about that, like the install the packages, stuff like that. The npm has over 1 million packages, very similar to the Python. And the single language, it's huge. You could just use the JavaScript on the front end and back end. And then comes to the Express. It's the web framework. The Express is a web framework that makes Node.js development simple and elegant. But Node.js is kind of like the engine, the Express is the car built around it. Yeah, the Express has three key functions, which is first, it's kind of routing. Routing maps URLs to functions. And the second is the middleware. It's the most important concept in the Express. I shall just use the coding later to instruct you, but just let me first finish about the concepts. And the third is the request and the response objects. Yeah, I shall show you them in the coding later. And finally is the MongoDB, the database. The MongoDB is a NoSQL database. Instead of tables with fixed columns like the traditional SQL database, MongoDB stores very flexible JSON-like documents, which is much better, from my perspective, much better than those MySQL stuff. It got some kind of key concepts. The documents, all those are very individual records stored in the JSON file and JSON only. Now, after talking that much about this stuff, we shall just move into we shall just dive into the coding stuff. And there's two parts I suppose that's of vital importance. As I have previously introduced before, the first is the package JSON, and the second, from my perspective, is the backend JSON. Okay, now I wanna dive deep into one of the most important concepts in the modern web development, the express middleware. If I had to choose one concept that truly represents how modern web applications work, it would be the middleware. Understanding middleware doesn't just help you use Express, it helps you to understand the framework in general, from the Django to the Laravel to the Spring Boots. They all they all just very similar patterns. The middleware is secret sauce that makes Express powerful, flexible, and elegant. Once you understand the middleware, you will see everywhere in the web development. Now, what is a middleware? Let me give you a very clear mental model. Middleware is just like an assembly line in a factory. Imagine that you are building a car, the car cassette just entered the factory, and it goes through the multiple stations, like just kind of install engines, add wheels, paint the car, ship the car, and all the stuff. In each the station, they do one job, singly one job. Then they passes the car to the next station. If the quality inspection fails, the car doesn't get shipped. It goes back to repair. That is exactly how Express middleware works. When the HTTP request center enters your Express application, the middleware will first pass the JSON body. Second, it just log the request. Third, it will just check if the user is authenticated. Fourth, it validate the data. And the fifth, your route handler just process the request. And finally, send the response back. And let me just show you here. Give you a code here. Right. So that's the previous middleware, and I shall just show you another middleware. Here, this is the station 1. You just use the express, and the station 2, you use the log request. Third is authentication. Third is the validation. Finally, you just post use the final handler. The request object is just like the car moving through the factory. Each station can add or modify parts of it. One middleware might add the request.user, another might add request.timestamp. By the time it reaches your route handler, the request object has all the function you needed. Now let me just show you another case of my stuff here. Okay, I shall just add another file. Let's call it another backend. Hmm. Here, use the constant, and here's the middleware one. You need to some kind of request for the runs for the every request. Below tier 2. Yeah, let me just by showing the code and just explain how these stuff are just working. First of all, first in the middleware one, you just runs for those every request. Kind of adding the you can see here, you just use the request to add a timestamp, and in the middleware 2, you just use request.user. And finally, you just got a route route handler. You run it if all those middlewares are called next. And next is very essential. It just means that everything is all right. And thus, 3000 is just where the local host works. And in the middleware one, it executes the logs request achieved. In the middleware two, it executes logs. It logs the checking authorization. And the router handler execute has access to the request timestamp and request user. Right. Right. Now, there's other types of middleware and real-world examples. There are several types of middleware, and understanding when to use each is crucial. First, the applications, the level middleware. This runs for every request to your applications. Here, just give you here. Here, this part, the app.use. This runs for every request to your applications. The usage case is for the logging, for the request timing, and adding heads for the calls. And the second is the router level middleware. This runs for only very specific routes. Again, this one you use the API for the administration. Use case is role-based access and control. The route very specific validations. And the third is the built-in middleware. As we have already talked about before, it's here, these stuff. These are very similar to the Python's library. These are very common for the Express to include them. You could maybe some kind of express.json to access all those JSON files. And the fourth is the third-party middleware. That's not that used. Uh, uh, yeah, I believe some stuff like that here. These are this one are very similar to the third-party middlewares. The NPM ecosystem has this middleware for everything. It's for the security, logging, and the rate limiting. And the fifth is for the error handling middleware. I really use these. And it's of critical importance of orders. Here, you could tell that when this, let me just switch to the JSON. So when everything is gone, when you use this one, it is wrong. For the order really matters. The routes define the first and JSON path define after the routes, and that's not going to work. As it as why it fails is because that the post requests come to the API task, which is your router handler before the JSON parser runs. Your request body will not be defined. And what is correct, of course, yes, is just to switch the order like this. And finally, why the middleware is so powerful is that it works in the real-world scenarios. Imagine you are just building an API for task manager applications. You need to some kind of pass the JSON bodies, log every request, require authentication, and handle errors gracefully. Without the middleware, you need to repeat the code in every route, which is very messy, where you cannot make well find the results in the errors. And with the middleware, you can route them very cleanly. So very similar to, let's say again, very similar to the Python. So you just call another function. The middleware lets you to write reusable, modular code. Each piece has its own job, and only one single job. They should be composed beautifully. And this is why the Express is so popular. The middleware makes complex applications maintainable. You can add features, modify behavior, and debug issues by simplify adding or removing middleware functions. And here comes the best part. This pattern is everywhere. We are going to maybe learn about the React, so that React has hooked the work similarly. The Vue has also its lifecycle methods. Even operating system use the pipelines. Once we understand the middleware, we understand the fundamental pattern in the computer science. First of all, let me read for sorry for that. And yeah, first of all, when the part I wanted to focus on is the package JSON. This one is quite useful, let's say. You can tell that in the first part is for the that's for the naming, the version and description. That's not that useful, but it tells what this file is for. And here comes to the one of the important part, that is when you type in the type module, so that in the all the all the upcoming JavaScripts, you could just use the import part. Let me just show you here. Yeah, this is a very easy stuff. And here you could just use the import part to import all the other files you have written, instead of just mix all the files in just one backend, which will make stuff very easy for others to maintain. Sorry. And then you can use the scripts. The script part is for you to use all the tests and links, and for the ESLint, which is for you to just style your code. And the keywords part is not that useful, but still again it's help you to learn the description. And again, here's the dependency, the most important part. Those dependencies just help you to just install all the required files immediately with just the following code. Let me just show you, which is npm install. When running this code, you will get a node module folder, and all this folder contains everything you need. You see that the .env, which is for you to about the environment, yes, link part, all those existing prettier, the plugins, and the node.env, the prettier, and the dependencies, as maybe I shall use OpenAI APIs, MongoDB, the Express, and the cause, which is of vital importance, let's say. And another stuff I have learned from the professor is that a very little tricks is that you use the start here. It is some kind of very magic stuff. So it's called in the node module. Yeah, in the node here, and node then let's look for that. I'm just trying to show you how that's going to work. Oh, it's a lot of. Let me have a look here. Yeah, it's kind of stuck. Yeah, yeah. The node here and the bin node.js, and when running that, you could just simply just run your simply just run your backend here. So I remember it should be yeah, it's npm start. When you run the start, okay, cool. You see, it's running. It's the server is running on this. Let's use the Google Chrome. Google Chrome is also suggested by our professor that it's got its own console instead of some kind of Edge, which is much better. Let's see. Oh, okay. You can tell that the midterm recording backend is running. I shall tell you how that's running later. Now let's go back. So this is a very easy stuff for you to just start your test instead of using any other forms, which is the most easier case I shall use, and maybe I shall use that later in my future works. And now, after the most important part, and let's say one of those less important part, which is the generated here, and yeah, and you could tell that, yeah, here the head part is for you to use all kind of links for the CSS, and here I just use use another CSS folder to contain my main CSS, which is a very good habit. You should just separate all your stuffs, your CSS in your folder, your picture in your folder, and I mean everything in your folder instead of mixing them up in a one file, which is very tough for others to maintain, right? And I find that HTML is very simple, so I shall just give a very quick idea on that. So from my perspective, the HTML and the CSS is just mainly using the tags. When I say tags, you see the body as a tag, div is tag, h1, which is the head. It should be the head one. It's also a tag. It's just using tag by tag, and which is just showing off everything. And when using different tags, you could just uh, mix them up. You could just use these all different tags to generate everything you want. Yeah, you could tell that's very. I mean, maybe a script is something tough for you to use. And here it's when you can also use the other scripts you have written from other ways. So here I just command that. So since I have not written any stuff there, but again you could tell that you could use a script here to go to front end JS to use that script there for those kind of stuff. And now let's go to the most important part from my perspective. It should be the backend.js. Now again, we have talking about the Node.js stuff. Here you see that's the backend.js. And from the beginning, we can just import the most important stuff here, which is uh, the express we have talked about before. The .env is quite of important. I shall tell you why later. And the cost. The cost here is you for you to use very it's kind of a middleware so that you can understand something else. Yeah. And as I have just previously talking about the import, when you use the type, when you use this one, the type module here, then you could just import other data from your other written files. Here you could tell that's the config part, which is the database JS here. Yeah, I will tell that's an async function for for me to just connect the backend to the MongoDB. Now let's go back to the backend JS first. We have talking about the course and the use the J and using the express.json. You could just and let the backend to understand what kind of JSON it used. And now here's the test route. When using the when I just use the npm start, I can use when using the test route, I use that to test whether the whole backend is running or not, whether there's all kinds of warning or some kind of error, so I can doing the debug there. Again, the debug, I remember it should be this one. Yeah, Control Shift and I, and everything will be showed up. Uh, so all these stuffs are all those previously wrong stuffs you could just check out. Uh, yeah, And here is the one for you to connect to the database. I just name it to the connect the DB. So here when I listen stuff here, I just use the console log for one to just check out. And, and now let's go to the, yeah, then go back to this part. The .env part is the stuff is contains my environment stuff there. So which is my Mongo database URL, which is on the cloud for me just instead of using the Docker there. I should told you that yes. Also, you could use the Docker to to start a local based MongoDB, but using Atlas, Atlas in the cloud, it just helps the others to access the database instead of just using the MongoDB in your local, which is not usable. Let's see, it's working or not. Yeah, yeah. Here's the one which is very easy. You just download the Mongo database and you could just click on start and everything should be running. But again, that's only the local stuff. Now let's go back to the backend.js and let's go to this part. How you could just connect to your database. And that's quite easy since I have just written my .env, so I just use the .env.config so that you can just access my URL, and after accessing that, you could just get this one here. And here's the part for you to. I have just spent hours on, let's say 2 or 3 hours on that. But again, that's kind of simple, but not that simple. Maybe everything should be different on your PC. So don't worry about that. And here is the export. Yes, the export part, which is for all those. There should be. I remember that there should only be one export per file for us to easy to access. And here's the connect database part. And yeah, you could just use a new Mongo client here, and you should await that to get connected, and then you just yeah, here's the database I created, which is called the register database. And you could see that I just create a fitness register database on the Mongo Atlas. And here in my file here, it's called the register database. And very similar, another called the record database. Console is for me to check out everything is running, and you could tell that app.local here you could get those status. Yeah, um, yeah, I believe that's it. And let me see if there's anything. Um, wait a second. Um, yeah, I believe that's it. Thanks for your watching. Maybe in the later courses, I shall just give you another recording of instructing you how to use the React. React is a very currently very popular form for others to writing code on instead of just using the vanilla. I have learned from several of my friends who is at work that vanilla is not that used at work, and instead the React is quite another revolutionary frame for others to get work. And that is all. Thank you for your watching. 没到啊，没到。